I would like to call to order the meeting for the Planning and Stakeholders Relations Committee. My name is Stephanie. Other board members of this committee, could you please identify yourselves?
Tom Bergender.
Other board members, could you please identify yourselves?
Joe Todd.
Theo McClenny.
Emma Schuker.
Chris Bersellis.
Thank you. The minutes from the May 25th meeting of this committee has been circulated. Unless anyone has any questions or corrections, I ask for a motion to approve those minutes. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We will now hear a presentation from Amy Silverman on an update on the committee for public comment period for the fiscal year of 2026 funding crisis and related service reduction plan.
Thank you.
Amy.
Good morning, committee members, committee chair, and board members and members of the public. I'm here to present on a couple of things this morning. First is an update on our public comment period for the proposed service reductions and fare increases that we presented to you all back in March. So as a recap, we have been in that public comment period since March 31st, and it ends today at 5 p.m. So we're still taking comments. So this is not sort of a formal presentation of all of the public comment, but we do have about 95% likely or a little bit more in of our public comments. So wanted to provide you with a more timely update rather than waiting a whole month for you to hear about what we have heard over the last 2.5 months. So we had several different ways that folks could give us feedback on the proposed service reductions and fare increases. So we had 3 hearings, which we had about 300 folks come out to provide comments to us. People could write us letters, so we received about 20 letters. Some other means of finding their way to us, just a couple online. We had developed a robust website that shared a lot of data and information. Our team's been working really hard on that, as well as a survey so that folks could give us their feedback in a way that we would be able to collect and analyze really quickly, as well as provide open-ended comments for their own personal stories of how these effects might impact them. So that is where we received the bulk of our responses. That's pretty typical for us in this internet day and age. So about 3,500 responses were received via that survey. We received about 125 phone calls and about 75 printed letters or other pieces of paper that folks sent us in the mail to provide their feedback that way. So in total, just over 4,000 comments over the 10 or so week period. And fairly typically for us, that vast majority being online. We received a pretty robust geographic distribution of comments. So there's a slide here showing Allegheny County at the center with the surrounding counties, and the number of responses that we received by zip code. So we asked people their zip code in the survey responses. I'll note that this slide is just summarizing those survey responses, not necessarily everybody's phone calls and hearing responses, et cetera. Some people did provide us zip codes during the hearings, but we did not request that as required information. So most of our responses are from within the city of Pittsburgh, about 2,800 of them. We did have about 900 responses from other municipalities around Allegheny County. Over 150 from counties outside of Allegheny. We do run service in 2 other counties, just barely, but we also know that lots of folks drive to park and rides from outside Allegheny County and then use our services here within the county. And then over 100 from outside of counties touching Allegheny County, so from across Pennsylvania, or even in some cases out of state. And we know that sometimes, riders may have residences outside of Pennsylvania, but may live here and go to school here, for example, may not formally have their residence in Allegheny County, even though they live here for part of the year. So our highest response areas were the Beachview and sort of Dormont edge of the South Hills area, Bethel Park, the north side, and then Wilkinsburg and parts of the east end of the city of Pittsburgh. So this slide is summarizing the support and opposition broadly for these service changes and fare increases. So at its highest level, we were asking people to provide us response on 4 different things: fixed route service reductions, fixed route fare increases, access paratransit service reductions, and access paratransit fare increases. As expected, many more people opposed the proposed changes than supported them, but we do have a different level of opposition. And so our highest sort of area of opposition was the access ADA service reduction that's proposed, followed by our proposed service cuts more broadly, and people could give us sort of a general, we oppose all of the service cuts, or could give us more detail, like I oppose, removing the Route 18, for example, if I rode that route. So that there's a summary there of sort of general opposition being at 78% versus specific route opposition of 21%. The access fare increases then followed that at an opposition of 80%. And then the fixed route bus and rail fare increases opposition at 60%. So none of these are surprising things for us. It does help us give a little bit more perspective as to how much people oppose something over something else. We broadly feel that all of the changes proposed here are not things that our community wants. They're not things that PRT wants to do either, but it does help us to get a little bit more fine-grained detail about what's most important to people. We also asked in the survey about, with service reductions and with fare increases as separate categories, how those would impact you or your loved ones or your community. And so this was a multiple choice question, and then you could say other and explain that other response as well. But things like losing flexibility, having increased travel time, et cetera, were logically the things that people said would impact them the most. Most folks under this service reduction will still have some transit service somewhere, but it might be greatly reduced. So folks' ability to be flexible with the time of day they have to travel, or if they can only take one trip to get to work, and maybe it comes 45 minutes after they get out of work. So things like that are the highest percentage of impacts for folks. But I did want to highlight a few that are really worrisome to our teams. 40% of people said that they would have issues with keeping their job with these proposed service cuts, which of course is a scary potential impact for us in thinking about our economy. 25% of our riders noted that access to medical care would become a real challenge under these impacts. And then about 20% of riders noted that they would have to move to a new residence or a new apartment because these impacts would cut them off from their ability to access the needs of their daily life. On the fare side of things, most folks noted that the fare increases may impact their community or their loved ones who may not have the means to afford that higher fare, but over 40% of people filling out the survey said that they would have to take fewer trips. So this is very worrisome to us. It's sort of this conversation about a death spiral when we provide less service or more expensive service, and then people are able to access it less. So then we have less riders. The fewer riders we have, the less service is needed on the street, and it sort of compounds over time downward. And then over a third of riders filling out the survey said that they would need to choose between traveling somewhere on transit and essentials. So, while we didn't necessarily define what those essentials are, we, my assumption would be things like, medical care or prescriptions, maybe groceries, utility bills, mortgage, rent payment, et cetera. And so that is also very worrying to our team. On the access paratransit side, we asked those same questions. And so I will highlight the most worrying trends that we saw here, starting on the ADA service area piece. Over 30% of the access respondents noted that they would have difficulty in accessing medical care, which we know that is a very critical purpose of our access paratransit system, right? It's providing lots of medical trips to people who need to and otherwise would not be able to get to their doctor or medical appointments for treatment. And then also we had the potential job loss and potential need to move around 15% or so of our access riders. So a little bit less impactful there. Our access riders are also much older, so there's a smaller percentage of them who are still working full-time, but certainly that medical care piece is very concerning. And then on the access fare increases, about 25% of riders here on paratransit noted the need to choose between whether they took their access trip or were able to pay for other essentials in their daily life. So that's concerning. And then 24% just said they would not be able to afford those fare increases. So they presumably then would not take, one or some of their access trips. We asked a few demographic questions, which people are not always super comfortable giving us the answers to, but when they do, it can help provide some interesting results for us. So one of the things that we did ask about was income bracket or income range. And when we look at the opposition for the fare increase, it is sort of a direct trend line that the lower the income bracket, the more opposition to raising the fare was there, which is expected. This is not an unsurprising response. I'm sure we would all expect to have seen this. And then our highest income riders are much more likely to be making that trade-off in the survey between, well, if you had to cut my, raise my fare or cut my service, I would much rather you raised my fare because I could still afford it and would then, potentially be able to save some service. But when we get to our lower income riders, that really, that trade-off becomes a much more difficult one. So with our lowest income bracket, we only had 24% of our riders supporting a fare increase, whereas with our highest income bracket, about half of our riders said they would support that, likely over thinking through service reductions. On this slide, we have the top 10 responses by route, and we can look at this as a overall number as well as a rate. Both are important for us because both have some challenges with how we sample data. So if we look overall by the number of comments by route, we often see the biggest routes with the most riders at the top, and that's not entirely unexpected here. So 2 of our 3 light rail lines had 2 of the 3 highest response rates. And then we also like to look at it by rate. So sort of as a percentage of how many people ride that bus or rail line, how many folks opposed or supported something. So for the total volume, our highest response line was the silver line, which was proposed for elimination. So not too surprising for us to hear that, followed by the 28X airport flyer, and then followed by the red line, and then some of the South Hills and sort of Western South Hills routes, the 39, then the 38, the 41, the 29, the 36, the 40, and then the 54. And then if we look at it by rate, so as a percentage of overall riders, we start to see some of the really small routes pop out and come to the top because they have so few people riding that when some riders filled out the survey and said that they opposed every route cut, right, sort of broadly, that will inflate some of these routes. So many of these are very small ridership routes like Route 18, the Route 05, the Route 71, Y45, 7, P13, P67, P65, Y1, and P71. So you can see in particular, the Route 18 had over 200% of its daily ridership oppose that reduction. That could be for many different reasons, right? That could be people just generally opposing the route, even if they don't ride it. They don't want any service to be cut. It could be that the riders of the Route 18 rallied all their friends and family members and asked them to fill out the survey too. And with such a small percentage of ridership, it gets inflated like that. So we look at both when we look at how people respond to make sure that we aren't over representing or undercounting anyone and how we react to these comments. This slide is a word cloud, which is something we think that we can pull from the survey data to see what words people are saying most frequently. So many of the words on this slide are words we would expect people to say if they're talking and giving us their story about how these impacts may affect them or their family members or their community. So it's more just of an interesting thing to look at. I think what's most notable to us and our team when we were looking through this data is that, we've talked a lot here about numbers and statistics. But the biggest word on this slide is people. And so these stories are really about people, and it's easy for us to drill them down into some numbers, but they really are impacting, our residents and our communities, or could be very severely. So we just want to keep in mind here too, that it's not just all about the numbers, but this is about people and their stories of how they need to live their lives. So what happens now? Our public comment period ends at close of business today. So our team will continue to go through and sift through all of that data. If there are any sort of narrative changes that we haven't yet had in this presentation today, we will bring those back to the July Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee meeting. We don't expect that the last 100 or so responses coming in will impact that narrative because we have over 4,000 responses at this time. So each sort of new comment coming in doesn't turn the boat too much. But if there are, we will come back and present any updates to what we've shown today. And then from this point out, our team is continuing to look at and has been continuing to look at while this public comment period has been going on, ways that we can continue to tweak any proposed service changes to have the least impact on our communities and on these people as possible. So we'll continue doing that, and we're in a little bit of a waiting game right now with seeing what happens at the state with legislature and support of public transit funding. As soon as we do have any updated information about if additional funding does become available, we will try to be ready to pivot and react as quickly as possible to bring an updated service plan, if anything should change, to the board and to the community so that we can give as much advance notice as possible before any changes would go into effect. So as it stands right now, the proposed changes would not go into effect until February 2026 at the earliest. And so that's sort of our holding pattern at the moment, is holding on February 2026, and we will continue to keep the board updated every month with planning for that time. And in the meantime, we'll continue to ask our riders and our stakeholders to voice their support for public transit funding. We want to thank all of the riders and our stakeholders who came out to our hearings, who came all the way to Harrisburg to voice their support. It's really impactful to us to hear the personal stories behind a lot of the numbers here. So with that, I will see if there are any questions about this presentation.
Thank you, Amy. Is there any questions from this committee members? How about other board members? Any questions?
Yeah, I do have a question. It's Jen Liptak. First, I wanted to identify that I'm online. I just didn't want to interrupt. So, Chair, I would like to mention that. Secondarily, listening to the presentation, I just want to get a better sense. So what it appears is the service reductions and fare increase that were presented, as been said many times, are not going to go into effect till next year. What is the period of time, though, that we'll have before we'll have to make a decision as a board, meaning that we have to provide public notice, et cetera? So if the changes were to go into effect in February, at what point would the board if we don't get enough funding to continue with the going concern as presented, at what point, how many months prior to that period would the board have to make decisions regarding the fares and the reductions?
Good morning, Madam Chair. I'm grabbing the microphone away from Amy, who will probably correct my answer. September is essentially the drop dead date because of all the work that goes into putting together schedules and public comment. The public comment window we have concluded meets our legal requirement for going out, getting comment about the comments themselves. So that's a separate work program that we've already done. But to get the work done and to properly notify people, we would be saying September for February changes. If it is the intent of the board to look at a different schedule, staff can always go back and come and provide recommendations. But the window of time from pulling the trigger to something hitting the street is 4 to 5 months. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So that's about, so there are still, there's a June board meeting, and then obviously the July board meeting. And then there's a September board meeting, at which point we would ask you for a decision. We would make a recommendation to you, actually.
Thank you very much, Catherine. I appreciate the clarification. And
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the presentation by Amy. Thank you. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Any other questions? Next, we will hear from Amy on a resolution seeking authorization for PRT to enter into agreement with a pool of firms for the general planning services.
Thank you, and good morning again, everyone. I have a resolution this morning for you, and this is to enter into agreements with a pool of firms for our general planning services contract. So our planning department and a few other departments use this contract to assist with many different projects that we do, mostly which are grant funded, to begin talking about new stations or new corridors here in Allegheny County as funding is available. So the current contract is in its first extension year and has one extension year remaining, but we want to have the new contract moving forward so that we don't have a big pause, in any services. This resolution would allow us to contract multiple consultants under 6 categories. So those 6 categories are general planning services, which we have selected HDR, WSP, and Gensler as the successful firms. For category 2, it's transit-oriented development support. That is Gensler and Hatch. Category 3 is equity support. That is MBI and WSP. Category 4 is sustainability support. That is Hatch and Evolve Environment Architecture. Public art implementation and conservation. That's Evolve Environment Architecture. And category 6 is service and infrastructure planning, and that is WSP and MBI. So these are the successful firms that were selected under each of those separate categories. So this resolution allows us to use funds from our grants and approved budgets to undertake work across all of those categories in a not to exceed amount of $22 million for the initial 3-year period. I will put a very large caveat on that this just allows us to spend money within this contract. This is not a $22 million proposal to spend money in planning. So each specific project, let's say we were successful in acquiring a grant from the FTA to look at a project, we then would be able to move that through the board budget process. If it got approved through the board budget process, then it would be a work order based contract to enable us to perform that work. So I didn't want anyone thinking that we were spending $22 million in planning. This just allows us and gives us maximum flexibility to be able to do that were we very successful in acquiring some of those larger grants. We have been fairly successful over the last handful of years. And so we do already have several grants that we have funds for in-house and plan to use those funds to begin work on some projects. We would have the option to extend. This is a 3-year proposal with an option to extend up to an additional 2 1-year extensions. And then I already noted the piece about the grants. So if there are notwithstanding any questions about this, I would ask that committee members for the Planning and Stakeholder Relations Committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval.
Does any committee members have any questions? I have a question. Can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes, I can. I think.
On the just look at the
Maybe-
services. I wasn't sure.
You go back one for me. Clicker's not working. Thank you.
Number 3,
Yes.
equity support. What does that mean?
Yeah, so we undertake, depending on the project, we may have very specific equity goals. So one project that we're getting started now actually has a very specific equity goal. And so we may spend time with our consultants thinking through a more specific approach to a project if we want to be particularly sensitive and cognizant of how that project might impact those communities. So we may do sort of a specialized equity community participation plan or
Mhm.
something on a certain, larger corridor project,
Okay.
for example. Yep. Any other questions? Answer?
Other board members?
Hello,
Yes.
this is Bobby. Sorry, earlier it seems like my audio was not working.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much for the presentation. I just had a question just from the earlier presentation. And I know we'll be discussing this later with the budget, but how, given that there's like currently uncertainty with the timeline of the budget at the state level and other things being discussed and in the air. What is the latest that PRT with these proposed fare cuts and fare increases and service cuts? What's the latest that timeline could be pushed back till?
That's probably a Catherine question too. I'll defer to her.
Good morning, Member Pham. Thank you for the question. The timeline, again, so Chair Liptak had asked, how far out could the board make a decision? So it's about 4 to 5 months on how long it takes us to get service modifications out, put up new schedules, so on and so forth. The board could choose, of course, to vote at any time to direct staff to come back and push off a schedule change, push off route changes. Given the financial implications we'd be looking at, we would recommend that the board would potentially say, hey, if we want you to do this at a different time, also come back to us cognizant of what that financial impact is going to be. So how does that hit our 10-year timeframe? What does that do to reserves? But with about 4 or 5 months advance notice, the board could give us direction to not do a schedule change. It becomes significantly more difficult the closer we get. But we have flexibility to work pretty much any scenario as we're coming down. You do make a good point. We currently don't, and we'll talk more about this in the finance committee, so get it back over to planning. We don't have a state budget yet, and we don't have a timeline of when we think we'll get that. And there's numerous different things factoring into when we would see transportation funding. So it is a very up in the air situation. That's an excellent observation. And I'll turn it back over to Amy.
Right.
Is there any other questions in regards to the resolution?
I just wanted a clarifying. So this is just a pool of planners, and we need planners, Amy, because we need to continue to prepare for our capital projects, not just now, but moving forward. And if we didn't have these planners, would it impact our competitiveness for future capital dollars for the agency?
Absolutely. So I would probably say that most discretionary grants we've gone after in the last decade have come out of our planning group and have really catalyzed our ability to move projects forward, including the university line and many smaller projects, of course, but that being probably the largest one that we have. So yes, if we aren't planning for the future and we aren't doing that first level of conceptual planning with the community to get the vision and the idea behind what we need for changes, that really hampers our ability to go after any discretionary funds. People reading grant applications don't want to see, oh, we think we might want to do this, but no real evidence of community support or a vision of what that might look like.
Great. Thank you, Amy, for that explanation.
Absolutely.
Great question. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, Amy.
Sure.
I think we're good.
Thank you.
Oh,
I think
well,
we need
sorry. We need to do some business here.
Right.
May I have a motion to advance this resolution to the full board for consideration? May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussions? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, Amy. Oh. We're done.
Yep, you can call for an adjournment.
Motion to adjourn. Have a motion to adjourn. Planning.
Motion.
Stakeholder.
Motion, second.
Second.
Okay, we're
Committee
adjourned.
is adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Emma Shuker. I'd like to call to order the Finance Committee. Would members of the committee please identify themselves?
Senator Williams,
Joe, are you here?
Joe Totten, sorry.
Oh, there you go. No,
I thought
sorry.
it was-
I knew you were here. Other board members, please identify yourselves.
Tom Bergender.
Stephanie Terman.
Tia McClendon.
Chris
Bobby
Marcellus.
Stan.
The meetings of the May 15th, 2025 meeting, the minutes were circulated, and unless there are any corrections to those minutes, I would move I would like a motion to approve the minutes.
One second, I would just like to note that this is Jen Liptak. I'm also here. Thank you.
Hi, Jen.
so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I hear a motion and a second. All in favor, or is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion
Aye.
carries. We have two proposed resolutions this morning. We are going to first hear from Dominica Brown on the authorization to adopt the 2026 operating and capital budgets.
Good morning. Before Dominica gets started on the resolution, everybody watching who does not know me, I'm Catherine Kellerman. I'm the CEO here at Pittsburgh Regional Transit. We are bringing to you today for the committee's recommendation the proposed fiscal 26 operating and capital budgets. I stress recommendation. The committee is not voting today to approve this budget. They're voting to forward this budget to the full board for their consideration and adoption next Friday. This is not a budget that anybody wants to adopt. This is a very painful budget, as outlined by Amy Silberman in the previous committee meeting. This budget represents the impact to Pittsburgh Regional Transit and Allegheny County. I mean, honestly, all of Southwestern PA and Ohio and West Virginia. We're not in a vacuum here. This represents the impact of this region of continued disinvestment in public transit. You hear us refer to a death spiral. Our CFO, Dominica Brown, has recently started pointing out our death spiral began probably back in 2004 with the first level of significant funding cuts that took 15% of service off the street in 2007. And we've constantly playing catch up. Pittsburgh transit riders have seen funding cut, and that has meant a reduction in service. And that has meant fewer people riding because you can't ride what isn't there. It also has meant an erosion in the overall quality of service. And by that, I don't mean that our operators aren't doing an excellent job. They are. I don't mean that maintenance and frontline supervisors and HR recruiters and the director of procurement, just because you hear Justin so singling you out. I don't mean that they're not doing good work. I mean that if your bus is gone from every 5 minutes to every 20, that's a big shift in your life. If your bus is overloaded every time it comes by, that's a denial of service very similar to having a bus run every hour or stopping at 6 p.m. on a Friday and having nothing on the weekend. And this has been reality for our region. So the approach from Pittsburgh Regional Transit has been different this fiscal year. It's been louder. It's been focused on what we deserve, not what we can afford, but what we deserve. And I would argue that this is the mature way to look at your budget, not just, well, here's what I can afford and put out there. Why don't we get to do the vision? Why don't we get to say what we deserve from transit and figure out a way to get there? This starts with the only tool we have available for funding, which is our state legislature. Everyone on these meetings has heard me wax poetic. I'm so sorry. But you've heard a lot of conversations about how we are funded and why we're funded and how much of our money goes to bridges and tunnels, many of which don't have transit on them. Put this all together, but we are funded as a public resource from the state. We would love to have other options. We would love to be able to come back after we stabilize funding with our legislature. We'd love to come back to Allegheny County and have this conversation about, hey, do you want gondolas over the Mon? Do you want 24-hour service? Do you want hardened passenger infrastructure? Do you want a downtown station? What do you want? And how do we have this community conversation to afford it? This is not the time for that. The conversation right now is, how do you keep as much on the street as possible with the resources you have? In previous years, we have only looked at a 2 or 3 year horizon. It is very clear that that does not work for us. It just means we're going to cut service in a few years. It's time for us to take a longer view and realistically to fight for the funding that supports a service that our region deserves. Now, we are the transit agency. We can't go out and advocate. We can educate the heck out of you. We cannot advocate. That'd be inappropriate. And we are very grateful to all of our legislators on our board and beyond, on both sides of the aisle, who've been very, very publicly pro-transit. We're even more grateful for our local advocates, who is so rich as to have too many friends. The outpouring of information and focus has been huge and tremendous. And humbling, I think, if you work here, to see how many people really love the work that we do. I know we're awesome, but it's nice to see other people know that too. Having said all that, this budget represents no increase in state funding. We know that our partners in the legislature are, I know the House is active today and has been working on bills. The Senate is out and will be in next week. I will be in Harrisburg next week as well. So will our team. A lot of us will be there. But we don't have legislation that has passed both the House and Senate and been signed by the governor. So this is what we have. It is grim. It is the beginning of the death of transit for our county. We can be baby Boston, or we can be the suburbs of, I don't even want to pick on another city. We're at this inflection point. Who do we want to be? So with that depressing lead in, I'm going to give it over to Dominica Brown. But I do want to stress to board members and members of the public, we are not asking the board to actively approve the demolition of transit. We are bringing forward the most responsible budget we have, and we are taking it from there.
All righty. Good morning, everyone. This review of the budget is going to kind of go into some of the details that Catherine just mentioned, but really a high-level overview to finalize what we presented last month. So the operating budget total is $539,256,823. This would be a 0.6% decrease compared to the current budget for 2025. And that is primarily due to the reductions that we have planned going into effect in February of 2026. So we'll have 5 months of a reduced budget. This does consider, as Catherine mentioned, 35% service reduction, 2 bus garages being closed, the light rail Silver Line being closed, removal of bus line redesign, and closing of the Wabash Tunnel. Our capital budget is $187,888,010. And this is an increase primarily due to increased federal funding for buses and a few other things that we'll get into later. For our operating revenues, we're looking at $70,060,000. That is passenger fares. You can see there's a reduction in projected passenger fares from 25 to 26, and that is primarily due to the changes in revenue that we would expect to see because of the service reduction and fare increase. The fare increase would be to $3 for our base fare, and on average about a 9% increase for all fare products. Also, there's a reduction in access and contracted services, advertising, and a slight increase in other income. This pie chart shows our expected revenues just as a total for earned revenues, 2% advertising and 5% interest income. 60% of those earned revenues would be passenger fares and 15% of access, with contracted services being 17%. Our operating expenses, our wages and salaries would be reduced, which would reflect expected separations, employee separations. We do expect increases in pension and employee benefits. Part of that is due to increased pension costs, and the other part of that is due to expected costs for separations, employee separations. Otherwise, there would be reductions across the board with the exception of other expenses and provisions for injuries and damages. But all of these reductions are reflecting the reduced services and closed garages and expected cost reductions associated with those. Our expenses are primarily employee benefits, wages and salaries, with 8% being pensions, materials and supplies at about 9%, purchase services at 5%, and access costs at 6%. Our subsidies, capitalizations, and reserves make up the remainder of the budget. Our revenues, we are, as you can see, our state operating and county match expected for 2026 remain flat from 25 to 26. That would change in the event that there is additional funding coming from the state. This budget would also change in the event that there's additional funding, and we will return to the board with an amendment to the budget. Capitalizations would be reduced a slight bit, but we do expect to use an increased amount of reserves or deferred operating assistance, and the interest that we expect to see from those reserves would be decreased a slight bit. So of our subsidies and reserves, the state operating assistance would be about 62% of the total amount of subsidies and reserves, capitalizations of about 13%, 14% of reserves, and our local county match is at 9%. For our capital budget, the capital funding is federal at $21.4 million and state funding of $8 million, and then our local county match and other funds at about $200,000. Excuse me, $4.6 million, with a total capital budget of $187.88 million. This pie chart reflects what we were showing earlier. 74% of the funding would be state, 24% federal, and 2% local. Expenses for our capital budget are debt service, which we anticipate would remain the same. These payments will continue until 2029 when the current debt service will be satisfied. We have an increase of revenue vehicle replacement costs because there is a plan to purchase buses in 2026. Fixed guideway improvements would increase slightly, while facility improvements and support programs would decrease a bit. And this pie chart shows all of our capital expense categories, with fixed guideway being the primary capital expense at 34%. So this resolution is requesting an authorization to adopt the fiscal year 2026 operating and capital budgets and execute the local match certifications. As a review, the operating budget would be $539,266,568, and the capital budget would be $187,888,010. Exhibits A and B are the support for the operating budget and the capital budgets. And included is also the local match certification that would authorize the county to match the required amounts for our capital and operating funds. Again, PRT would return to the committee and the board with an amended budget pending state funding conversations and decisions. And barring any questions from the committee and board members today, I respectfully request the Finance Committee recommend this budget resolution to the full board. Are there any questions?
I do
Yes,
have,
I have a question. I have a question. In light of the fact that you're contemplating reduction in service as of February of next year, is there a need to purchase the number of buses that you contemplate? Because it seems to me that you'll have an excess number of vehicles available to meet the PRT needs, at least in the short term.
Privacy wants to get that one for you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. This is Catherine. That's an excellent question. We did not buy, and I'm looking at maintenance to make sure I get, so you're Dawn, you're not maintenance. I apologize. Looking at our chief maintenance officer, we had deferred and moved around the purchases of our new articulated vehicles. So we are behind. We haven't purchased articulated for how many years? Okay, so for regular service. So we are a few years behind that. So we are already in the process of what would be drawing down that articulated bus.
sorry.
Oh,
Catherine,
sorry.
I did not hear
Thank
that.
you. Okay. All right, let me start over. So we had, we're in the process of matching up what our fleet should look like for the newer service levels post the pandemic, but we still have to replace the Arctics when they hit a certain age. So usually we would replace a bus at 12 years. Post 12 years, we're rebuilding the engine, the transmission, the maintenance costs start going up. So by deferring previous years of articulated bus purchases, it's pushed that out for us. So regardless of, we will be drawing down, but the vehicles we have still need to be replaced. Does that make sense? So we'll need fewer, but the ones we need still need to be within the useful life. So we're not necessarily expanding, we're replacing the old ones that need to be retired out. But future purchases will be looking at how do you shrink that fleet as well. Make sense?
Thank you.
Great. And Don, all right, good. Don knows it.
I also have a question, a comment and a question. So thank you for the presentation. I will be voting yes to move this to the full board because I think the full board needs to have a discussion about this, especially in light of actions in Harrisburg. Speaking of Harrisburg, yesterday the House passed an amended version of the governor's transit proposal, House Bill 1364. It passed on a bipartisan vote of 107 to 96. Now that comes over the Senate for us to consider. That House bill is based on a 5-year plan. So I'd respectfully request that the PRT staff prepare what a 5-year financial plan could look like. I know we've been based on a 10-year, which made sense based off of what we did in Act 89. But since the House action right now is at 5 years, I think it would be helpful for the board when we consider next week and have this discussion that we have an understanding of what 5-year might look like.
I want to answer that, then I'll finish with Tom.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you weren't
You-
finished. I am very sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, it's okay, Member Williams. So I see that your request was noted, and Dominique also had mentioned that. I just had one piece. My name's Don Revedius, Catherine mentioned, Chief Maintenance Officer. I had one piece of follow-up for Member Bergender. So the Arctics, these would be articulated buses for next year. We did purchase 69 for the BRT service, and these are to replace the other our normal diesel articulated fleet. So we're broken up with 35, 40, and 60-foot buses, and the remainder of our 60-foot buses are near the end of useful life. So planning and scheduling can properly fill those routes with those vehicles because of capacity. Even though we will have an excess of 40s, which we are retiring down, 60s are needed for certain routes just to help manage. And Amy can explain later to the planning piece, but it's a matter of vehicle type is why we're requesting, not just to buy more buses. It's a specific vehicle type that we're limited on. Thank you. Sorry, you have to handle it.
one more point to that too, which is that as I think you all are aware, we also have existing overcrowding. And so right now, this state funding crisis that we are in is an operating budget crisis. It's not a capital budget crisis. And so if we can have one longer bus instead of having two shorter buses, that enables us to preserve more service on the street by having some more articulated buses. So we've been working with Dawn's group on trying to find that right balance, and Dominica's group as well. Yeah, so I just wanted to add that.
And I'll
Apologies,
also note
Mom,
that
for jumping in on you there. Apologies.
No, I was just going to note that there's a plan for 36 articulated buses. 6 of those buses are funded by an EPA grant that we received, and so those will be electric buses. But yeah. Are there any other questions? And thank
Yes,
you,
this
Senator
is-
Williams. I noted your request for the 5-year, so we can provide that.
Thanks, Dominica. Sorry to interrupt. This is Bobby. I this is a follow-up from my earlier question about the timing of the cuts. It's particularly also with the way that the Public Transportation Trust Fund allocation formula is currently works. There's another spiral that happens as soon as we start cutting service and losing riders. We continue to lose that funding as well. I know currently we have a deadline around approving a budget for the next year. Senator Williams has already put in a request around a 5-year budget. And if this needs to be done after this budget is moved for recommendation for the full board, but this is not, especially with things still moving at the state level, I would hope to see a different scenario that looks at a later date with these service cuts and fare increases. I think this is your department's purview. You know best in terms of what's possible. There's obviously in this current scenario that you're presenting, you're trying to present a balanced budget based on the amount of money that is coming in right now. If it's possible to present a scenario where those cuts are pushed off for at least 6 months, given the time frame we know in terms of our need to inform the public until we know exactly how much is coming from the state, and especially also so that we are not preemptively cutting. Rather we will make that decision once we know what the state has fully, where the state has fully landed, and I think that also would reflect our commitment to the public, because at the end of the day, this is about what is happening at the state level and the decisions that are being made there in terms of the funding that PRT is receiving. Yeah, that's it from my end.
Yes, thank you, Member Fan. So as Catherine mentioned earlier, and you're absolutely right, whenever we cut service, it impacts the formula funding that we receive, and it reduces the allocation that we receive because of cutting service. We have fewer riders, less miles, less hours, which directly impacts our state funding. And you're right, that is exactly what this funding or transit death spiral is. And as Catherine mentioned earlier, about we've taken out 36% of our service in the last 25 years. And as we've continued to reduce service in order to contain costs, we've only exacerbated the challenge that we have financially because it's reducing our increases in state funding. So, having to take service off of the streets is kind of like kicking ourselves, honestly. And so it's the last thing that we would like to do as we're considering, longevity for service and being able to keep something out there, how we're considering our reserves, whether or not we're using them all now or trying to use them to stretch out service for the next 10 years. Those are the things that we're looking at. We are looking introspectively as well as externally to figure out, how can we stop this from happening? Because once these cuts do go into effect, if they were to go into effect, it only exasperates the diminishing of service in this region. So yes, we are looking at ways that we can hold off on these cuts, whether it's, finding money in capital, using more reserves, things of that nature, and what those implications would be for the long term if we were to do those things. So yes, we can provide that. But Catherine wanted to add something.
Thank you, Dominica. Good morning, committee members. To Dominica's point, we can model out a bunch of stuff. I would ask the committee to indulge staff and take a vote on what you would like your direction for us to be. We have been working obviously on a 10-year time frame with some pretty set numbers, and we have had feedback that our numbers are too big, our time frame is too long. I would prefer for the ease of staff moving forward for us to have a vote saying, directing staff to be able to have at least a broad outline by next week of what the impact would be of the bill, which has most recently passed the House, or like looking at us holding back for 6 months. We will not be able to bring you something finalized and fleshed out within 10 days. It is not possible that we can come back to you with a budget or something that's fully fleshed out that reflects all these that reflects this information. It's just it's too many moving parts. And I don't think I'm hearing that from the board that you're recommending we bring a budget for consideration. I think what we're hearing is continue to take this budget forward for discussion and potential adoption, but have the information ready to discuss if the most recent House bill gets passed, what does that mean for us? Or if we were going to postpone these changes for 6 months, what that would look like for us. So I guess I just want to get some clarification from the committee of, yes, take this forward for further conversation, but as a committee vote directing us to Senator Williams' request, be responsive to what this most recent House bill would look like for us in 5 years, and to Member Phan's request, if we push off these changes for 6 months, what that impact is for us for funding, and what that looks like with our reserve. If I could make that request from the committee just to get votes on that, that would be helpful for staff.
Chair Shukar, may I ask a clarifying question?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, Catherine, for that. And Senator Williams, thank you for that request. Catherine, I'm not sure that we would need, it almost seems like you're asking us to vote on just asking you to prepare materials, which we do all the time. So I don't know that we need for that, but I want to clarify.
Okay.
So
Good.
Senator, if I may, Chair Shukar, may I address Senator Williams? I just want to clarify.
Feel free.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Senator, what you were asking, I tried to write it down, is you just want to, given the Nielsen bill and the movement, which you see, which thank you very much for reporting that. That's very good news. You would just like for the PRT to begin to model that so we can review it, correct?
Yes, because we've been basing our $117 million off a 10-year projection and what that would look like. So I'd like to see what the 40 million proposed from the governor over 5 years, what that ends up looking like, PRT's like missing pieces, and how that would impact cuts and routes and fare increases. So just trying to take our 10-year, what we've been talking about 10 years down to 5 based on the House actions, I think would make sense.
Okay. The next question I have, and Sandy may need to chime in. So the bill that we have before us, the resolution for the budget, reflects what we know right now as fiduciaries exist for us to be able to move forward into the next year. And based upon information, Sandy, I think that we received regarding our time frame and our requirements via law to pass a budget as fiduciaries, which is the worst position to be in as a fiduciary. We're being recommended by the staff to vote on what we know in this period of time, which is here's what we know, what we anticipate the budget's going to be. So the budget that's before us, although I can say I'm not happy with it, I think every board member may agree with me on that. I do think it presents the best case that the staff can for what they anticipate for the next year. So Sandy, given that, if we move this budget forward and say members decided to approve it at next Friday's meeting, we would still have the ability, pending any legislative passage or any new funding, to come back and amend that budget to add more funding into it. Is that correct?
Yes, Chair Liptak, that is exactly correct. And under the Second Class County Port Authority Act, it expressly says that the board may amend the budget at any time. And so in the event that more funding is made available to the agency after the current proposed budget is passed, the board will be presented with a new budget, which it can consider and pass if it thinks appropriate, and amend the budget if the current budget is voted on and passed next week.
And Madam Chair, if I can piggyback on that, the intent of staff and our intent throughout this process has been pass the budget this fiscal year for what we know, but come back as quickly as possible. So ideally, as soon as the July board meeting, but that we would be back as quickly as possible with amended budget reflecting the funding that comes down from this cycle, so we can right the ship, for lack of a better expression.
And if I may continue, so that makes the request from Senator Williams very timely, because considering any possible movement or hopeful movement on any additional funding, having that information available to present to the board once hopefully completed or passed will allow us to more quickly amend our budget, hopefully. Is that I'm thinking, I'm not trying to speak for you, Senator, but I'm thinking that's where you're going with this. Let's be prepared so that if something happens, we can come back quickly as a board. And then hopefully I would even do an emergency meeting if need be to amend the budget. Is that the intent?
That is the intent. And I think that member fans' request on the delaying the cuts for 6 months is the same type of thing, because I don't want to go down. If the House and Senate are moving forward and are looking to do a budget and they don't get it done in June, and we maybe get it done in September, has been, said in the press. I don't want to go down a path of budget cuts when we just need another month or two to figure out what happens. So I think member fans' request on seeing what a 6-month hold on service cuts could look like and what is the budget impact of that, I think is also plays into my request. So I think those go hand in hand.
I think both of those requests, if I may, Chair Shakir, I think both of those requests are very timely and make a lot of sense in preparation for future planning, which we hope we can move forward. I don't know, and this would be a question for Sandy. I mean, I don't know that we need to vote on that. We don't usually vote when we ask for information. This is more asking just for them to be prepared. But I'll go to Sandy, because I mean, we didn't vote to tell you to prepare the budget to present to us. You just did it. So I think what the senator's asking and what member Fan is asking is, can you plan? Can you be prepared and be ready to come back with a model that can be reviewed publicly by the board for consideration? And I don't want to speak for you guys, but I think I'm just trying to get us in a place where we're organizing the request so we can move forward and then hopefully be prepared to do something quickly. And I think that's the intent originally from the request from Senator Williams.
Yes, Chair Liptak, again, I agree with you. It's not necessary for the board to vote on its request for information. And I don't want to speak for Catherine. What I think I heard from her is that she's looking for us to get on the same page as a board and then make the request clear so that the staff knows exactly what its tasks are to respond to. And I think through this discussion, we're making our way towards that conclusion, but there does not need to be a board vote on these requests for information.
And one last clarifying, if another board member asked for a different level of request, that's still available to a board member. So we're not saying that this is the only thing that members, this is something that the senator had requested, and I think it's a great request, and a member Fan as well, but that doesn't preclude any board member from asking for any additional information. Just wanted to clarify that. And sorry, Chair Shakir, I will hand it back over to you. And thank you for allowing me to ask my questions.
So then I'm going So I want to ask 2 clarifying questions if I can. So on the 6-month timeframe, member Fan, we will probably come back with an 8-month timeframe because by contract, our schedule changes are every 4 months. So it would be, we can get creative, but we would normally do our math to either do the schedule changes in February or October or potentially June. June is 4 months. October is obviously 8 months. We can always talk to our union about negotiating coming up with an August schedule change. I don't think that's an issue, but for administrative purposes, we'll look for 8 months just because that lines up with our schedule of what our folks are used to for schedule changes. Barring any other feedback from the committee, we'll go with 8 months. And then to Senator Williams' request of looking at 5 years, we will also make sure we're going through the text of the proposed bill so that we reflect what's in that bill. So our understanding, it's a funding level for 2 to 3 years and then something different. So we will tailor our response to what we see in that bill, if that's okay.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
I do have one question. Question, Catherine, or it may
Yes,
be
ma'am.
for someone else. But how long does it take to disperse the state funding? Because one of my concerns, of course, is if we do have to do service cuts or fare cuts, making sure that it's not irreversible once we get the funding.
So if we were to implement the cuts, it's very difficult to put that service back in. However, generally, the state's timing, once we understand the amount that we will receive for the year, we receive a set amount each month. Last year, the state implemented a new program, which took some time for us to get our funding. We're anticipating that things will go a little more smoothly this year, but also in the event that that does occur, we do have reserves in order to, maintain cash flow until we are reimbursed. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you, Dominica.
No problem.
Chair Shakir, I do have one more question related to the content of the budget.
Mhm.
Thank you. So I asked this last year and I want to reiterate it this year. So last year, the budget was passed under deficit spending, meaning we utilized a significant portion of reserves to fund the budget. I mentioned and brought this up last year, my unhappiness about it, but my realization that this is the situation that this agency and many others were in, where there's still a rebalancing of using ARPA and CARES dollars and not having additional funding to meet the basic needs of the organization. So if I may ask Dominica, the operating assistance from the reserves anticipated last year that were budgeted, and then how much that number has changed this year. Because I just wanted again to reflect on the record that we have consistently been using a significant portion of reserves, which this year is well over 10% of the projected 25-26 budget.
Yep. So last year we budgeted to use about 50 million, 49.7 million in reserves, and this year we're budgeting 65.6 million.
Thank you.
For 2026. So current year 25 was 49.7, and then the proposed 2026 budget is 65.6 million.
And that's an increase in reserves fairly significantly, and that's including a reduction overall in the budget from year over year, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a $15.8 million increase. And yes, it includes the slight reduction based on the service cuts.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair Shakir.
Are there further questions?
Yes, sorry. This is Bobby. This is just that last clarifying point, and this is just as a still newer-ish member. The earlier clarification around the changes that we'd hope to see, or the alternative presentations that we'd hope to see in July. I'm trying to understand the difference between that as a request for information and having that be on the table for discussion next month, essentially. So are we asking for a request for information, or are we asking for an amendment, or this is a question for anyone who can answer.
So Member Fan, I think what staff is understanding it is to be ready as quickly as possible to have maybe some broad strokes to be able to share. We will not have this done we could potentially have broad highlights next Friday. We will not have something heavily structured, but we are understanding this as getting together the information for consideration. We will, until we actually have funding, which has been approved by the legislature, we will not bring a budget amendment to you unless otherwise directed. But to meet our fiscal responsibility, to meet our requirements under the Second Class Port Authority Act, we will wait until we have definite funding to bring you a full budget amendment.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So,
So,
sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
Chair
Go ahead.
Shakir. Oh, okay. I mean, I was just going to follow up to make sure to clarify. So that's next July, we would still at the very least review those scenarios that we described.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so to summarize what I'm hearing, the requests from Member Williams and Member Fan to the staff to work up broad strokes about the budget effect of an 8-month rather than a 6-month deferral of the service cuts, and what a 5-year fiscal outlook looks like. We have made those requests and we don't need to formalize them with a vote, but we are
Right.
on the record as requesting that information from staff.
Mhm.
Okay, as long as there is consensus on that, and there are no further questions, which if there are further questions, please speak up. I would like to ask for a motion to advance the operating and capital budgets to the full board at next week's meeting.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Next on the agenda, we are going to hear from Amy Silberman on the authorization to establish 4th-year budget with TransDev Services.
All right, good morning again, everyone, and board committee and board members. So I have a resolution before you today for our Access Paratransit program. So this is to approve the fiscal year 2026 administrative budget, and this is under agreement R21-10. This resolution would approve the 4th year of a 5-year contract that we have with TransDev Services Incorporated, which is the company that administers our Access Paratransit program for individuals with disabilities and older adults in Allegheny County. This administrative budget is negotiated, reviewed, and adjusted through an amendment each year. So it's a bit of a unique contract in that way. This year's budget recommends a not to exceed amount of $2.4 million. For TransDev Services Incorporated. This is a 5.7% decrease from the fiscal year 2025 administrative budget, and those cost savings are primarily due to TransDev bringing their legal and information technology services in-house. That is it. So subject to any questions that committee members might have, I would respectfully request that the committee bring this resolution to the full board for consideration.
Do we have questions? All right, hearing none, can I get a motion to advance this to the board, to the full board?
So moved. So moved.
Second?
Second.
Hearing a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we are going to hear from Dominica again for review of the May 2025 financial statements.
Hello, everyone, again. All right, so our passenger revenue trends, revenues for the month of May are about $600,000 below the budgeted amount for May. However, it is $100,000 higher than last year, May. So improvement, but not quite hitting the budget. Our total revenues are about $200,000 below budgeted amounts, and that is primarily due to lower fares and access revenue, higher interest income. Expenses for the month of May are $4.2 million below budgeted, and that is due to every category except for utilities coming in below budget. Compared to last year, expenses are $8.7 million higher. That is primarily due to wages and benefits increases. Subsidies for the month of May are about $300,000 below budgeted, and that's primarily due to timing differences and should normalize by the end of the year. And May year to date, we're looking at $600,000 below budget when you look at actual compared to budget. And that is again due to fares and access, with interest income making up the difference. In year to date for May, we're looking at $36.9 million less than the budgeted amounts being spent. And again, that is because every expense category is below budget. Subsidies year to date for May are about $100,000 below the budgeted amount. And again, that is due to timing differences. Compared to last year, we have basically $107 million less in subsidies, and that is due to fully expending our federal stimulus funds. For operating reserves, we began the month of May with $408.4 million in reserves. There were cash inflows of $45.9 million and outflows of $43.5 million, with the month of May ending at $410.8 million in operating reserves. And that is the end of the financial review. Are there any questions?
All right, hearing none. That concludes the Finance Committee meeting for today. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned.
Good morning. I will now call, well, first, I do want to say that given the sensitivity of the impact that these cuts will have on livelihood and independence and economically, I want to say that I appreciate all the clarification coming out and understanding our ability to amend and push back as we await the state results on funding. So I just want to extend my appreciation for that. I will now call to order the meeting of the Performance Oversight Committee. Moving to roll call, will members of the committee please identify yourselves?
Senator
Will other
Williams. Sorry.
all good, all good. Will other board members please identify themselves?
Tom Bergender.
Emma Schuker.
Joe Totten. Joe Totten.
Chris Bursellis.
Thank
Jen
you.
Liptak.
Bobby Fan.
Thank you. The minutes of the May 15th, 2025 Performance Oversight Committee have been circulated. Unless there are questions, I now ask for a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion carries. Next, we will move to the proposed resolutions, beginning with awarding of bids by Mr. Kava.
Thank you, and good morning, committee members. I have 6 items today for your consideration. All bids were publicly advertised and e-business documents were distributed. The first item is bid number B2504-26, and this is for maintenance, inspection, and testing of fire protection systems. This service is to be utilized in the inspection testing of the fire systems throughout PRT's operating locations. 204 suppliers were notified of the bid opportunity. 5 suppliers accepted the invitation. 4 bids were received. A recommendation that a contract be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, SA Communale Company, and the estimated amount of $415,485. This will be over a 3-year period with no renewal options. Item number 2 is bid number B2504-24. This is elevator and escalator service and maintenance. This service is to be utilized in the preventative maintenance of elevators and escalators at all PRT operating locations and stations. 382 suppliers were notified of the bid opportunity. 4 suppliers accepted the invitation. 3 bids were received. A recommendation that a contract be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Industrial Commercial Elevator Company, in the estimated amount of $2,249,960. The contract duration will be over a 3-year period with no renewal options. Item number 3 is bid number B250319. This is for bus stop shelters. These shelters are to be utilized throughout PRT service areas. 687 suppliers were notified of the bid opportunity. 2 suppliers accepted the invitation. 2 bids were received. A recommendation that a contract be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Duo Guard Industries Incorporated, in the estimated amount of $1,297,655. Contract duration will be over a 5-year period with no renewal options. Any questions on the first 3 items? Okay. Item number 4 is bid number B250321. This is for janitorial supplies. These supplies are used in the maintenance of all PRT operating locations. This solicitation was advertised as a line item award. 637 suppliers were notified of the bid opportunity. 10 suppliers accepted the invitation. 6 bids were received. A recommendation that contracts be awarded to the lowest responsive and responsible bidders as follows. DeSantis Solutions for line items 1, 2, 3, 5, 14, and 15 in the estimated amount of $107,546. WB Mason for line items 4, 8, 9, 17, 24 through 26, and 28 in the estimated amount of $50,698.48. Liberty Distributors for line item 8 in the estimated amount of $44,800. And L&M Sales for line items 10, 12, 16, 18, 20, 21, 23, 30, and 31 in the estimated amount of $35,098. This will be over a 3-year period with no renewal options. In here, these are just some typical items that I'm holding. The very first one is a squeegee, mops, and a broom. These are some of the common items that we do, high consumables that we use. Okay, item number 5 is for dump trucks. These will be utilized at PRT's Way Department for snow removal and daily functions. PRT wishes to purchase 3 2026 International Model HV 507 dump trucks under the terms and conditions of the PA State Coast Guard's contract number 25-E22-519 for municipal work vehicles. Recommendation that this cooperative contract be awarded under the same terms and conditions of the PA State Coast Guard's contract to Hill International Trucks, LLC, and the estimated amount of $371,580. The picture that you see here, ours will actually be in white, and this is for the cab and chassis only. The last item is for the dump truck upfits. Again, these will be utilized in putting a dump body and hydraulics and plow fittings on the dump truck. PRT wishes to purchase 3 upfits for these international dump trucks under the terms and conditions of the PA Coast Guard State Contract 25-E22-432 for municipal work vehicles. A recommendation that this contract be awarded under the same terms and conditions of the PA State Coast Guard's contract to Stevenson Equipment Incorporated in an estimated amount of $315,765. Subject to any further questions, I respectfully request these bids be taken to the full board for approval.
I have a question about the dump trucks.
Yeah.
As I reviewed the documentation ahead of time, it seems to me that you're working with 2 different state contracts, right, to make these purchases?
That is correct.
Is the difference between what you're buying under one contract versus the other, the chassis in one and the body of the vehicle, the other?
Yes, on the first purchase to Hill International, we're going to buy the chassis, which is the cab of the truck. And then we send it off to another vendor, which is Stevenson, who will do the upfit. They will put the dump truck body. They will also install any hydraulics and a plow that will be used for snow removal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from board members? Hearing none, do I have a motion to advance these resolutions?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Kava.
Thank you.
Now we will have Mr. Setcher present on authorization to extend and amend the agreement for property and casualty risk management services.
Yes, good morning, Committee Chair McClenny and other committee and board members. This resolution would authorize PRT to extend and amend its agreement with Aon Risk Services Central Incorporated for the continued provision of property and casualty risk management and brokerage services. The services under this agreement number R21-02 include, but are not necessarily limited to, design and marketing of operational insurance coverages required by PRT, such as our directors and officers liability, employer practices liability, cybersecurity, and excess workers' compensation insurance policies, evaluation of insurance proposals and placement of insurance coverages for PRT on an as-needed, typically that's annually for each policy that we hold, basis, and providing advice and support regarding insurance requirements that we set and reviewing them to ensure that there's compliance for PRT contractors, vendors, and entities that access our property for projects and other activities. In June 2021, and following an RFP solicitation process consistent with PRT's board adopted policies and procedures for soliciting professional and technical services, the board authorized PRT to enter into agreement number R2102 with Aon for an initial term of 3 years through September 30th, 2024, with the option to extend the agreement up to 2 additional years at PRT's sole discretion for a total not to exceed amount of $285,000. Last June, the board authorized PRT to exercise the first option year to extend the agreements through September of this year and increase the total not to exceed amount to $380,000 for continued funding of the services provided under the agreement. The resolution before the committee for consideration today would authorize exercise of the second of the 2 optional extension years to extend the agreement through September 30th, 2026, and increase the total authorized not to exceed amount an additional $95,000 to $475,000, again, in order to continue to fund the services through the proposed second extension year. And I would note the fee is paid on a quarterly basis, and Aon has agreed to hold the fee flat at $95,000 if the second option year is exercised. So subject to any questions members may have, I'd respectfully request the committee recommend this resolution to the full board for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Setcher. Do any board members have any questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to advance this resolution?
Motion.
Any motion? Do I have a second?
So moved.
Any discussion? Motion carries. That concludes the meeting of the Performance and Oversight. That concludes the meeting for the Performance and Oversight Committee. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
So moved.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
My name is Tom Bergender. I'm the chair of the Technology Committee. I'd like to call the committee to order. We'll begin with a roll call. Members of the Technology Committee, Tom Bergender,
Joe Totten,
other members of the board,
Senator Williams.
Emma Shukir.
Tia McClenny.
Jen Liptak.
Bobby Fan.
the minutes from the May 15 meeting have been circulated, and unless there are corrections or comments, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
Motion.
Any, do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Awarding of bids, I'd like Justin Cava to come up and talk to us about a bid that he has for us to consider.
Thank you, committee members. I have one item today for your consideration. The first item and only item is the Barracuda Email Gateway Defense and Cloud Archiving Services. This is utilized by PRT's IT infrastructure department to monitor, curtail spam, phishing emails, and provide email archiving services. Our PRT wishes to utilize the PA State Coast Stars contract number 6-E23-259 to purchase a 3-year subscription. A recommendation that this cooperative contract be awarded under the same terms and conditions of the PA State Coast Stars contract to Phillycom Incorporated in the estimated amount of $235,800. Subject to any further questions, I respectfully request this bid be taken to the full board for approval.
Do I have any questions or discussion? Do I have we have a motion to take the resolution to the board. Do I have a
Motion.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Eric Bilski, would you give us a report?
Good morning. My name's Eric Bilski. I'm the Deputy Chief Engineer here at PRT, and I'm going to give you a little overview of our automatic trip stop system on our light rail line. And then at the end, I'm going to present a resolution for consideration. So what is automatic trip stop, or ATS? Basically, this system is designed to provide protection to the light rail vehicles in order to enforce speeds and also protect red signals. And what that means is if you're on a train and you're proceeding down the tracks, should an operator have a medical issue or should a switch on the track not operate as intended, the train would be forced automatically to stop and prevent an accident. It's radio frequency identification. The easiest way to think about that is like Easy Pass on the turnpike for your transponder tag from your vehicle to the unit. So in the picture I circled in the center of the track, there's a white box, and that would be the reader. And on the right side of the track is a signal. If the signal's red, the box will activate and trip the train. Next slide. Thank you. So the background here is we initiated in 2018 for a trip stop system replacement of a 40-year-old system that was on our red line. And as I mentioned before, that system will automatically apply the brakes on the train. Unfortunately, the old system would cause inadvertent false trips and abrupt braking when it wasn't expected. And that was a magnetic inductive coil. When it would sense metal, interference, or anything else, sometimes it would cause a forced braking, which was, a nuisance to our patrons, and so the new system eliminates that. Next slide. So in 2019, PennDOT Rail Transportation Safety Committee did a safety review, and this is in response to federal regulations that requires all transit authorities to do a signaling system assessment of their rail lines, and it's federally mandated. And so we were already ahead of them, and we were already installing our ATS on the red line, but we did comply and also analyze the rest of the line. And the Silver Line system was identified that we could also use the technology on the Silver Line. So we moved forward in 2022 with a sole source agreement with Hitachi to upgrade the ATS on the Silver Line to provide similar functionality. Sorry. That line did not have an ATS system. That line operates currently as line of sight, meaning the operators only have visual indication ahead of them. There is not a system in place right now, so this will obviously upgrade the safety and provide more controls on that line. So this resolution seeks authorization to extend and amend the agreement with Hitachi Rail, STS USA for the Silver Line Library Hybrid Automatic Trip Stop System. Currently, the design for this line is underway. While Hitachi was designing this line, there was an unforeseen condition with the red line equipment, which was identified that we're working through right now with them to address. And so at this time, we need additional time to resolve that issue and then also complete the library line under this agreement. So 1-year time extension, retroactive to May 1st is needed, which would bring the new completion date to May 1st of 2026. This extension would not involve any increase to the contract amount, which currently stands at $1,524,439. Pending any further questions, I respectfully request the committee move this to the full board for approval.
I have a question. What is the status of the Silver Line if we have to implement service reductions?
Yeah, so great question. So as it stands right now, the Silver Line is proposed to be closed in February of 2026, as I think we just had a robust discussion about that with all of you. Hopefully those changes, may be able to be delayed some amount of time, and that we will look at what that delay would mean. This work, however, is already so far underway and is necessary for the safety of the line. So it's really critical, especially given that we are not asking for any increased costs that weren't already board approved, that we complete this project, especially should state funding come through. We want to make sure that we continue to comply with our state safety regulations in getting this project over the finish line, so to speak.
You anticipated my next question. Any other questions or discussion?
This is Bobby. I'm just surprised to learn that ATS wasn't already on there. I don't know if there have been incidents in the past, but operating by line of sight seems like not ideal. But I agree with Member Burgunder in terms of the timing with this upgrade, but the answer provided also makes sense to me.
Any more questions or discussion? We have a motion.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? This concludes the technology report. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And this concludes our meeting for today.